You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
We're continuing our series on hobbies and visiting with our friends about the hobbies that have been meaningful to them, using their hands and working, maybe making something, creating something. We're going to continue that conversation with our friends right here on The Coffee Hour. Thanks to Concordia University, Wisconsin for supporting The Coffee Hour. Find out more about Concordia University, Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
Joining us this morning, the Reverend Randy Asburry, pastor at Hope Lutheran Church in St. Louis, Missouri. Pastor Asburry, welcome to the Coffee Hour.
Thank you, Andy. It's great to be here.
Good to hear your voice, and looking forward to sharing about a hobby I think that it appears to be very important to you, and that is woodworking. Where did your interest in woodworking begin, Pastor?
Boy, it is kind of hard to pinpoint, but I think back to my 8th grade year in middle school, or back then it was called junior high, and I had a shop class, and one of the electives I signed up for was woodworking. So I really hadn't done anything before that other than, play with Lincoln logs or Legos and make different things. I've always liked to make things. And so I took this shop class and learned all kinds of neat tricks and got to use all kinds of really powerful tools, RRRs, Tim the Toolman might say, and I guess that's kind of where it started. I've always had a love and, tinker with things, and then over time realize, hey, I still like that. Let's go back to it over and over again, and it's just a very fun, very fulfilling.
Lincoln logs are the best start to everything, and also shop class.
That's right.
So then how did this skill or hobby evolve over the last several years to now making the things that you make now?
Well, a lot of it's just the desire to be in the shop, which means desire to be productive. It's kind of a therapeutic release for me. Okay, what can I do? I remember it's been about, 11, 12 years ago. I was on a sabbatical and doing the same thing, therapeutic time in the shop, and a fellow pastor said, hey, can you build me some bookshelves? So I found a design and in one of my woodworking magazines and showed it to him. He says, that's it. So enjoyed doing that. And then from there, just kind of, what else can I do? And then a few years ago, what's it been, about 2015, 2016, something like that, I had a parishioner ask, have you ever thought of making prayer kneelers? I said, oh, no, I hadn't. So I did some research, looked at different pictures, designs, and whatnot online, and then came up with my own design, drew it out myself, and figured out, okay, how can I be unique in some of these features, as well as how can I do this with my tools, with my skill set, with my setup. And I've made several prayer kneelers and came up with three different kinds of prayer kneelers. And I get a request now and again, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? So I'm always thinking, what could I do next? And just, practice makes perfect sort of thing. And then other inspiration comes up as events unfold and time goes on. I had one pastor friend of mine a few years ago talk to me. He says, Randy, I've got these slats of bowling alley wood. His church used to have a bowling alley in their school, and they had to remodel and take out all the wood. And so this company came and they cut the bowling lanes, 2 or 3 of them, I think, into these slabs, and gave him several of them as a reward or a price or fee. And he says, I'd like to make a table. I said, oh, I've never worked with that kind of wood before. It's, if you know, bowling alley wood is a very hard maple kind of wood, hard to work with. And so we made a table for him, and then he paid me with a couple of those slabs, or one of them, I should say. And so after that project, I looked at those slabs and said, hey, I can make 2 end tables out of that. So, the sky's the limit on some of these ideas sometimes. Yeah.
Now, when you made end tables out of those, did you make lamps out of bowling pins by chance?
No, I did not. But the
Now you're gonna
legs,
have to.
yeah, and I'm going to have to. But the legs on these tables, I shaped them like bowling pins.
Nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is
Nice.
really cool.
So, how do you when you accept a challenge like this, when someone approaches you with a new project, how do you go about learning the new skills needed for that project? Are you the researcher? Are you searching all over YouTube? Are you getting books and reading through books, or do you find someone else and learn hands on from them? How do you learn a new skill when you need to add to your repertoire?
Good question. Yeah. I mean, you keep learning new skills every project, even if it's something you've done before and you're repeating, like my prayer kneelers. Oh, I can do this differently, or different process. But I do tend to be a researcher. I'll look things up in, maybe one of my magazines, or look to one of my woodworking shows I watch just about every Saturday when I can. If anything there fits, I'll look at different plans and say, oh, can I do this or can I do that? No, maybe not. Maybe a different way to do it. But I do rely on YouTube a lot because there's a lot out there. And so I'll just type in, search for, make a prayer kneeler or make an end table or something like that. And so I'll research it. And so when somebody comes to me and says, can you make me this? My first thought is, okay, can I? Is it possible in the tools I have and my interest, really, to be honest? And then if I think I can, then, yeah, let me research it. In fact, I'll give you one example. I had a member of mine, he's one of my shut-ins, a couple months ago. He says, Pastor, can you make me a shepherd's crook? It's like, shepherd's crook? Why do you want a shepherd's crook? You're not out tending sheep or anything like this, so I'm not sure what he wants it for. He still hasn't told me. But I said, well, what do you have in mind? And he wants it to be something more ornate, so it's not used for the actual herding of sheep. He wants something different in mind. And we talked about, could you bend the wood? Could you cut the wood out and things like this? Different alternatives and ways to go about it. But so I'm going to be working on that very soon here.
That is a really interesting project. Talking about all of the technical stuff, what are some of the things that someone would need to know going into this? Because there's all these different kinds of wood and there's different kinds of tools, and doing all this research. What are some of those things that are the first steps for getting into this?
Well, you've hit on a couple of them already there, Sarah. The kinds of wood, different tools. But the first thing I would say to anybody wanting to start out is, number one, if you're interested, just start. Even if you only have some simple hand tools, there are all kinds of things you can make with what you already have. And then over time, you'll grow in that knowledge and how many tools you have. Because one of my philosophies is, and you can ask my wife about this, every project needs a new tool. That's just an unwritten law of the Medes and Persians, But over time, you gain that wisdom, and you talk to others who are already doing it. So, like my pastor friend with the bowling alley wood, he really didn't have any shop tools other than a little toolbox with some wrenches and a hammer, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so, and in those few years since then, he said, "Oh, I've got this new tool." Okay, great. You know how to use it. So you have to learn how to use the tool as well. And there are all kinds of tips out there, videos and books and magazines that give suggestions on what kind of tool do you start with. A drill, a handsaw, when do you go to a table saw, a router, that sort of thing. And so just take it easy as you're comfortable with it, but also safety is a big thing. Always make sure you're safe because, those metal blades cut through flesh pretty quick. Mm-hmm. I do not have experience in that. As somebody I've heard once said, don't trust a shop teacher with missing fingers. So, yeah, you want to be careful and know the tool and know how to be safe.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Why Why woodworking? What is it that you love about woodworking? What keeps you coming back to the shop?
Well, I think first of all, Andy, it's the prospect of making something, as you said in your opening, being productive with your hands. I think God has created us to be creative. He's given us this ability to make things. Now, he made the world out of nothing, but we have to start with material that he's already given us. So that's one thing. We just have this urge to make things. Secondly, what I really love about wood is it's warm. It's easy to work with. You can cut it, shape it, mold it, sand it, give it color if you want or not. All kinds of different options. But there's just something about those two things of the warmness, friendliness of wood, but also being able to make things. And then just the sense of satisfaction that, hey, I accomplished something here. And then when you add to that another element of doing it for someone else, especially if they pay you for a prayer kneeler or something like that, but you're helping somebody else out too, and they can appreciate the work you do. So those are kind of the basic things I look at, and I mentioned before, it's therapeutic. Get away from. I'm a pastor. You mentioned that earlier on. Get away from the regular routine, the rigors of writing sermons, preparing Bible classes, seeing people in the hospital, going to meetings, and say, okay, this is downtime. This is something totally different. It helps the mind, the mental health as well. Just, okay, I'm going to do something different, be productive. Because as I look at it, for us as pastors, we don't always get to see the fruits of our labors. Mm-hmm. But when you make something, when you're working with wood and put some pieces together or carve some things out and say, oh, I did that. Look at that. So those are the big motivations there. And why woodworking? Well, I'll give you this little story. My son, when he was in high school, was on a robotics team. And they made different robots for different kinds of competition each year. And these were big things. It took a team of high school students to do this. I was one of the, not really coaches, but one of the helpers. And at that time, his first year of doing this, my son got to do what's called a lathe, but for metal. Now, I have a lathe for wood, but he was doing lathe for metal. And it's kind of the same process, but different techniques, because with metal, if you're carving it, trying to take a cylinder and put little grooves in it, for example, metal is cold and it's messy because you have to put oil on it to keep the friction from making the metal too hot and things like this. And I remember thinking at that time, this was probably a good 10, 12 years ago, I remember thinking, yeah, I like wood much better. It's warmer. Yeah, it gets all dusty and all over you and everything like that. But metal is just colder, I would say. Not that it's bad or wrong, but so that's another thing that I like about wood.
Interesting. I want to learn more about what's in your wood shop as well. When we come back, we're going to take a quick break. We'll continue our conversation. We're talking hobbies with Pastor Randy Asburry. His hobby is woodworking. So we'll continue that conversation right here on the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
You're a miracle. You know that, right? A living, breathing, one-of-a-kind miracle. You were created to stand apart, to share your gifts in the service of others, to make an uncommon impact in a common world. And at Concordia University, it's our mission to help you do that, to live uncommon. To learn more about Concordia, go to cuw.edu.
You're listening to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
We're talking hobbies in this. We're continuing our hobby series, and today we're talking with Pastor Randy Asburry of Hope Lutheran Church in St. Louis. His hobby is woodworking, talking about working with his hands, creating things. And Pastor, you just painted a beautiful picture for us earlier of how it's so helpful to you to be able to create something, to start something, for it to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, to be able to step back and see that it's finished. How is this hobby of woodworking, how does it relate to your various vocations? You mentioned how it can be a break from your day-to-day work, but how does it relate to all of your vocations?
Well, let me relate it, first of all, to my vocation as a pastor. I remember reading this somewhere, I forget who it was, but the author said that serving as a pastor, especially pastoral care, when you're caring for people in their time of need or just visiting them in general, is a lot like woodworking. And that kind of piqued my curiosity there. And I said, well, so I read on, and he says, well, with woodworking, you have to follow the grain. You have to know the grain, how the grain works, how you can cut the grain, how you can put two pieces of wood together for, strong joint. You have to figure out how the grain's working, things like this. And that influences my pastoral work. You have to go with the grain, not go with the flow, but go with the grain. You have to figure out what's going on in, say, a person's life, or in the congregational meeting, what's kind of the mood of the room, sort of thing. And also with woodworking, you have to be precise, especially in a lot of your measurements. What's the saying that goes with woodworking? Measure twice, cut once, right? So you make sure you get the board the right length, for example. Well, you do that in pastoral work too, or I find myself doing that too, of trying to be precise in, say, what I say in a sermon, or how I bring comfort to somebody in the hospital bed. If I, bring a comfort that's for somebody who's has anxiety, but that's not going to help somebody who, just had a knee replacement surgery, for example. So learning those ins and outs, and also you mentioned tools before, Andy. I have lots of tools in my shop, and that's another way I look at my pastoral vocation. What are my tools, and how do I use the tool the right way and for the right job? So, for example, a sermon is meant for everybody in the congregation. But the little devotion I do beside the bedside in the hospital, that's a different tool. The Lord's Supper is a different tool from baptism. These kinds of things kind of help shape my vocation as pastor as well.
You mentioned the tools. I'm curious what you have, and if you have a few that are maybe favorites or go-tos that are like the really important tools in your shop.
Oh my! Oh, how long do we have again? Well, of course, every good woodworker needs a table saw, so you can cut pieces of plywood down to the right size, or even other boards down to the right size, and you can do different kinds of things with a table saw. I have a what's called a compound miter saw. I cut angles and things like this. I have a drill press. I'm thinking the big ones off the top of my head here, where you can drill holes in for different purposes, like putting a wheel on a toy or something like that. I have a band saw. That's for cutting curves and things like that you can't do on a straight blade like a table saw. I have a router, or several routers actually, and that's used for different things like making the end of a piece of wood flat, or following a certain template, or making shapes, rounding a piece off, things like that. So those are the biggies there, but you also need little tools like hand planes, screwdrivers, hammers, circular saws, all kinds of things. Oh, I have a really cool tool called a biscuit jointer. What does that sound like to you? Gonna make biscuits and stick them together? Something for food, right? No, but
Exactly.
this is a fun tool where you can join two pieces together, say in a bookcase or something like that, and you make this little cut as kind of a half circle on one end and half circle on the other end, and you put this little thing in between that's a little oval shape, looks like a little football, and you glue them together, and that's the biscuit, that little thing that goes in between, and it holds the wood great. I love it because then I don't have to use nails and screws, and you can't see how it's joined together.
Now, if we gave it an American name, would it be the cookie jointer?
Funny.
I don't know if it's English versus American on that name. So
Funny.
So you just listed a whole bunch of really great tools. Do you have one that like if you could only have one tool in your shop, what's the one tool you had to keep? That's a mean question, isn't it?
it is, because it's kind of like asking me to choose my favorite child. I love them all. No, if you're talking for utility or usefulness, the table saw's got to be it, because you can. That's so basic. You can do great cuts and do some very basic woodworking and even grow from there with just a table saw. Once you learn how to do different things. But that's for utility. If I had to choose a favorite based on what it does and how much it can do, I'd probably have to choose the router, because that's a kind of a cylinder-looking tool, and you put a bit on it, and you can put all kinds of different bits on it to do all kinds of different things, like shape the edge of a piece of wood to be rounded. That's what they call a roundover, or give it decorative shapes. You can also use it to carve out things. I made last Christmas, I made a game board for my son for Christmas. He's into this game called Dominion.
Yes.
It has all these little parts. Oh, yes, Sarah knows this.
I love that. I love it.
And it's a rotating game board, so it's on a Lazy Susan. But on the top of the game board, it has slots in it for the cards and for the little coins and things like that. And so had to figure out how to do that with a router, and did all that carving out of these little things out of a solid piece of wood, but made all these little circular holes and card-shaped holes and things like that. So that would be my favorite for use. Well, for all the things it can do is a router.
That sounds awesome. I think I need one of those now also.
Well, now I know how to make it. The first time I was figuring it out.
Do you have some? We talked about some tips for newbies. Do you have some do's and don'ts? Maybe some things to definitely not do or try when you're doing woodworking.
Oh boy, there are all kinds of do's and don'ts. I mean, don't get your fingers or your hands too close to the blade, for example. That's a general rule of thumb. But also, don't breathe the sawdust if you can help it. Have a mask for that, especially when you're sanding or creating a lot of dust. Always wear eye protection. Know the tool. As several people who do shows always say, read and know your owner's manual and what makes the tool work and things like that. Take care of your tools. They will not work if you don't keep the blade sharp or keep things clean, things like that. So a lot of different tips here, but maybe in the more proactive or encouraging sense, like I said before, just do it. Do a project. Find something you can handle with what you have, whether it's a handsaw or a hand plane, versus the powered tools and things like that, and get that sense of satisfaction and accomplishment.
What is your most memorable mistake in the wood shop?
Oh, the most memorable one, huh? Oh my. Well, this one's probably a basic one, but I do remember this one. I was back in that bookcase project I mentioned before. I was cutting a pretty good sized piece of wood on the table saw, and with a table saw you have to feed it through straight and make the cut. And this one, somehow I don't know, got distracted or whatever happened, and it didn't go through quite straight. And so if you know anything about the table saw, the blade is turning toward you as you're feeding the wood in, and it kicked that big piece of wood out and hit me kind of right in the hip. Oh, I remember that one. Okay.
Oh,
So yeah, that's why they always say, stand to the side or
yeah.
keep it straight, things like that. I've had
That was-
close calls, but mistakes. I think maybe another mistake I can remember is I'm just going along back to my prayer kneelers here. And it's like, I know how to do this. I'm doing this, and get down to the assembly part of the project, and the shelf in the prayer kneeler where you can put your books underneath the slanted part there. Got to assembling it, and the whole thing was about a half inch too short.
Oh no.
What did I do? And that had been several days before that I made that part. So, yeah, things like that happen. Yeah.
Oops.
Oops. Yes, exactly.
So you just start over and move on and hope nobody saw you.
Pastor Randy Asburry, Hope Lutheran Church in St. Louis. Thanks for sharing your hobby story with us on woodworking. It's been a pleasure catching up with you today and hearing your story.
Thank you, Andy and Sarah. It's good to be with you again and hear your voices.
You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@KFUO.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.